Good evening, everyone. I see that the time has, we've reached 6:30 p.m. and we would like to welcome you. We are anticipating a few more panelists that will be joining us this evening. But welcome to our first of several community conversations where we want to listen to you regarding our elementary school capacity planning. Before we get started with our agenda, I would like to take just a moment to turn the mic over to my colleagues. And if you could please say your name and your role, and then we will get started with providing some logistics. So Matt, I will turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Kelly. Matt Bolden, School Business Administrator and Board Secretary.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Rebecca Gold, Interim Superintendent of HR.
Thank
Assistant
you.
Superintendent.
Principal Whalen.
Hi, Principal Whalen from Riverside School.
Thank you. Dr. Tu?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Tu, the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. Welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Crowder?
Jen Crowder, elementary special ed teacher and PREA co-president.
Thank you. Eric?
Hello, everyone. Eric Zolak, Supervisor of Special Education for the elementary schools.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I see Principal Ramirez.
Good evening, everyone. Luis Ramirez, Principal, Littlebrook School.
Thank you. I'm not skipping over our board members. I do see you, but we're going to save the best for last. Sarah Moore?
Hi, good evening. I'm Sarah Moore. I'm the Supervisor of Elementary Education. Thank you so much for having me.
Principal Perez? Deneen, sorry.
Oh, hi. Okay, sorry, Dr. Kelly. Deneen Gutierrez, Principal at Community Park Elementary School. Good evening.
Good evening. Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Collier, Communications.
Thank you. And Dr. S.S.
Good evening, everyone. Angela Ciso Stenson. I'm the principal at Johnson Park Elementary School.
Okay, we do have several board members. I will start with the chairs of our the board's long range planning committee. Brian?
Brian McDonald, co-chair of the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee and co-chair of the Operations Committee.
Thank you. Beth?
Hi, Beth Barron, co-chair of the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee.
All right. We also have another co-chair of the operations, Susan.
Susan Cantor, co-chair of operations.
Okay, and I do see our board president is on the line. I'm not sure if she could take the mic. So I will introduce her, Daphne Kendall. So welcome again, everyone. We're going to go ahead and proceed to the next slide. Just really briefly want to go over that the purpose of our gathering tonight is to hear from you. So logistically, what we're planning to do is we are planning to review with you some of the enrollment challenges. I see it as a great opportunity, as well as go over or review with you some of the proposed solutions from the 2021 master plan. But the real key purpose of this evening is to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts, your questions, your ideals of how we can, as a community, address the growing enrollment of our at the elementary level. So the way that this evening will look is you will have a brief presentation. Then we're just going to open the mic, or if you want to use, I think, the chat function to put in your question, or if you want to raise your hand, our business administrator / board secretary will call on you, and we're just going to listen and we're going to take notes. Also this evening, and we will also push this out to the entire community, we would love for you to please complete a Google survey that was designed by our communications extraordinaire, Elizabeth Collier. And Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind putting that survey in the chat, we'll continue to do that throughout the evening. Before we get started, I would like to go over some of the agreements or norms for tonight's agenda. First of all, we want to hear from as many people as possible. So Mr. Bolden will, when we get to that section of the agenda, he will just go over with you the number of minutes each speaker will be able to speak. We are collectively seeking the best solution for all of our children. Unfortunately, based on the logistics, we are unable to, based on the logistics, we are unable to break out into breakout rooms. However, there will be a lot of opportunities in the future where we can have in-person conversations in smaller settings. And we are just asking, as usual, and we are sure that each of you will follow by this agreement, that we model respect, kindness, and empathy as we are listening and sharing. Next slide. All right, on tonight's agenda, again, this is a listening session regarding the elementary capacity, the planning conversations that we need to have in order to hear your voices. We will begin with background. Where are we now? What's next? Look at our collective challenge in terms of some of the enrollment data and projections, and review again from the 2021 master plan, elementary planning options. And then we are planning to spend the majority of our time answering your questions, listening to your thoughts and your ideals. All right, we're going to first turn the next section of our presentation over to members of our Board of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Again, I'm Beth Barron, the co-chair of the Long-Term Facilities Planning Committee of the board, here with my co-chair, Brian McDonald, and we just wanted to set the stage a little bit for tonight's discussion. Again, going back to things we've talked about in the past, the background of why we're here, how did we get here? Our community is growing. We have about 1,100 new residential units planned that we know of. The future of our future students need to have appropriate school facilities that reflect the values of this community. For example, inclusive learning environments and flexible collaborative spaces. The current planning efforts that we're talking together about really began in 2019 and 2020, where we brought in outside planning professionals who then convened community meetings, they made presentations, and then COVID happened, unfortunately, stopping us. And enrollment did go down during COVID, which gave us a little breathing room. In 2021, the planners actually gave us recommendations. They gave the board recommendations, but we didn't take any action. There really was nothing done with them. Those recommendations and all the documents from that time are available on the board website, on the district website, under board, under future planning. You can find everything there. But nothing really happened. So we're restarting again, and it's 2023. So we have just received in January updated demographics, and we are restarting the process. And in March of 2023, we directed the administration to prioritize elementary and middle school capacity solutions that are sufficient for the next 5 to 10 years based on the demographics that we received. And again, solutions, we're talking about sufficient classrooms, specialized spaces for special education, STEM labs, spaces for fine arts and athletics, and core spaces like gyms and cafeterias. So again, the reference on the bottom of that slide, which we'll give you later, shows you where you can find some of those documents if you want to read some of the past. It's not where we are now. We're working with it. So where we are now is the board perspective as your elected representatives is, what is best for our children? We look to our strategic plan goals to show the values that we have for our children and for education. And those goals are a focus on early years, ages 3 through grade 3, wellness, inclusion, and supports for all, opportunity and achievement for all, and successful transitions, foundations to thrive post PPS. So those are things that really ground our planning. We've got that just as where we're coming from. It's got to infuse everything we do. And so we keep wanting to repeat that for people. We also have to think about what the community can afford. We need to be cost effective in using our existing facilities. We need to be financially prudent in how we renovate or construct. Sometimes the state will give us money back when we renovate, less so when we do new construction. There's all sorts of financial considerations that we take into account, and we need to be fiscally sustainable. That means that our operating budget, which we are tight every year, which is capped at 2%, needs to work for us in the future. And so whatever buildings we build or whatever changes we make to our buildings or how we use them, we have to think about how that impacts the operating budget in the future. So those are some of the big picture things that the board thinks about. And one other thing is the board, how do we decide? How do we consider these things? And ultimately we are elected to kind of make these decisions, but how do we do that? We get data, right? We look at the updated demographic studies. We look at the strategic plan goals again, the values of our community, what we want for our children. And then we take multiple inputs that include questions, perspectives, and suggestions from community engagement like tonight. We look at the lived experience and ideas of our students, what's really happening with them in the classrooms. We look to our educators and our staff to say, what is your experience? What do you suggest? What are your concerns? They're the people who are with our kids every day in the classrooms. We will have recommendations from our internal planning team, which is made up of educators, staff, and administrators. They'll be getting together and thinking about what their recommendations are. And then we will be getting advice from outside professionals, including our demographer, planners, architects, and engineers. So all of these inputs kind of will go into board deliberations ultimately, and the conversation about what direction we go into.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you've heard about where we've been, where we are now. So what's next? In terms of what's next, here is our timeline regarding the discussions. So we're currently having discussions in person and virtual with various stakeholder meetings for inputs and suggestions. We do have, as you just heard, an internal working group of educators and administrators who are developing recommendations, and we will be using external professional advice on the design costs and budget implications. Late summer, as we return to school next fall, we would like to have a decision or a recommendation rather regarding which elementary option to pursue. And the plan or goal is that by March 2024, detailed plans will be provided to the board for deliberation and approval so that by September 2024, we could go out to referendum for a vote. And if approved, between 1 to 3 years, we would see completion, otherwise known as our students in the seats. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Bolden, and he will be providing you with an overview of some of the data.
Thanks, Dr. Kelly. To frame our discussion, our collective challenge with our enrollment data, we have projections from our consultants, the SLAM group out of Southern Connecticut. We'll look at projections. They've looked at capacity. We'll look at out-of-zone placements. We'll review some of the good suggestions from the 2021 master plan. We're going to focus on some of the challenges tonight. We're focusing on our elementary challenges. And then we're going to look at some options that have been put out there to solve some of these problems. So this is a updated projection from SLAM Group of our demographics. They were updated in January of 2023. It shows significant growth at all 3 levels of our schools, elementary and middle school, about 8.5%, with the high school potentially at its peak of up to very close to 15%. This does not account for any future housing obligations as part of mandated upcoming fair share housing agreements and zoning changes, because those are unknown at this point. And as we know, demographics can go up and down, but with the amount of new housing units, we do expect growth in the district. This is an interesting slide because, you know, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It shows a disparity if, assuming we can keep elementary school projections based on our current programming, would show a widening disparity at 2 of our schools, Johnson Park and Littlebrook, with slightly over enrollment and slightly under enrollment at Riverside and Community Park. There are a lot of opt-outs in the Community Park attendance zone, and that has had significant impact on individual elementary school enrollment. As of October 2022, about 45% of the students who live in the Community Park attendance zone attend Community Park, while the remaining 55% opt out and attend one of the other 3 elementary schools. These projections assume no parallel track at Community Park. This shows similar data. It shows in the 2021 master planning capacities, and you can see Community Park is under capacity, and Johnson Park, Littlebrook are slightly over and increasing pressure at Littlebrook. This is a lot of it's due to where the planned growth is. We've taken some proactive steps recently with the next housing Princeton, the Avalon Princeton Circle development, which is coming online this fall. And it also shows Riverside to be slightly under capacity. Capacity has been asked a lot about, and it does vary on how the school is programmed. We do have more self-contained classrooms at Riverside. All 4 elementaries are approximately very close to equal size. Out-of-zone placements. So we've been talking a little bit about that. About 70% of our elementary students attend their zone school. Out of area placements are most common in the Community Park attendance zone. Of course, we have opt-ins also that come into the Community Park zone. As of October, as of this fall, only about 50% of the students who live in the Community Park zone attend Community Park school. Most of those remaining students, attend Johnson Park. Less than half of Johnson Park students live within the Johnson Park attendance zone. So we talk a little bit about the recap of the 2021 master plan. It was issued in May of 2021. A couple of years went into it. Board member Ms. Barron alluded to a slight halt. Of course, during COVID, we were all thrown with that, but about 6 months in, we started restarted the planning. The master plan provides a framework to support the educational vision, improvements, and investments needed to maintain PPS facilities for the years to come. The master plan serves as a starting point for deeper discussions and as a roadmap for the next steps in the process for pre-referendum feasibility study and schematic designs. Planning is a continuous process that never ends. The master plan will provide a foundation for future decision-making and plan refinement. A succinct recap of the 2021 master plan pertaining to elementary schools is provided on the following slides. So I'm going to throw it over to Drs. Kelly and Tu.
Thank you. Before we move on with the presentation, just one logistics. If the other panelists could please monitor the chat. If there are any questions that can be answered there, please do. I do want to take a pause break. We saw one comment in the chat that the slides were not progressing. I'm not sure if that still is an issue. If anyone is in the audience, if you could please let us know. We're now at the slide where we're going to talk about, okay, we're all good now. Thank you. All right, so as a part of the 2021 master planning, they did point out for the district some of the elementary planning challenges, such as the class size breakpoints, scheduling flexibility, DLI capacity and growth, adequately sized classrooms and resource rooms, uneven enrollment pressure, the need for flexible collaborative spaces, and providing space for inclusion, and finally, the parity across buildings, meaning that the 4 elementary schools would be on par in terms of the number of students attending. So that was some of the challenges that were pointed out in 2021. It will be interesting, Dr. Tu, since you work so closely with our 4 elementary schools, what are your thoughts? Would some of these challenges still remain today?
Yes, I think our enrollment dropped a little bit due to COVID. And then I think we came back even greater and better than before in the last school year and this current school year. So that's where we're seeing some class size breakpoints. There are two sort of hot zones for movement and turnover, it seems. It seems to be a lot in the CP zone and the Little Brook zone. And so when families sometimes move into the CP zone and they're, maybe have older children, they opt out of the program and then they are sent to either JP, Little Brook, or Riverside. So that's where sort of that disparity starts happening. The other things we're thinking about is just scheduling flexibility, trying to meet our different needs of our students, whether they require IEP services, English as second language services, academic support services, whatever it may be, as we have different breaking points in the buildings, making sure that the services are following the students and making sure everyone is receiving what they're entitled to. And they are legally, and we make sure that happens. But sometimes there is an imbalance of where we're shifting staff and where there are space for both staff and students. A big question that has come up is about class size. So there's currently not sort of ballpark figures in our district policy, but the district really tries to abide by around 20 for K and 2 and no more than 25 in grades 3 through 5. But as growth continues and we might have uneven growth, when you only have 2 sections in a grade level, and you have students who move in all throughout the year in Princeton because we have different international families coming in, different business contracts because we live in Einstein Alley. We have a lot of movement in December, January, February. And so even if we might start smaller with certain class projections, by March, we're up 5 or 6 kids than maybe we might have been in September. Those are things that we can't really predict. So these are all different challenges. And as we talked about earlier with dual language immersion and how during the pandemic numbers took a dip a little bit because of, school was difficult enough, hybrid and virtual, and now you're adding another language. I think some families might have shied away, but now that, we have 3 class sections predicted for next year at Community Park. And then it goes back to classrooms and resource rooms. I've gotten a lot of questions about, pre-K needs, kindergarten needs. So the state of New Jersey requires bathrooms in pre-K and kindergarten rooms, or they need to be within eyesight outside the room. And our pre-K rooms also need to be a certain size, square footage wise. So, there's different sort of bureaucratic things that help support the building and the plant of the physical plant of the school that we must follow or receive a waiver for. But as a kindergarten mom, trust me, I'd want a bathroom in the classroom, and I'm sure the pre-K parents as well, or as near by as possible. And then finally, as we are teaching, everyone says, oh, prepare for the 21st century. Well, we're a quarter of the way into the 21st century, right? And so how are we creating these collaborative, innovative spaces as we talk about preparing our students for a world we can't even fathom with, artificial intelligence, technology, et cetera. And then, of course, we always want to have opportunities for students to be included no matter what programming they're in. And then the parity across buildings. The other topic that we also want to think about are, our collaborative spaces such as gyms, cafeterias, libraries. Those spaces also, as we grow, need growth as well sometimes, especially when we talk about physical education, PE, and cafeteria space. So these are all just different challenges as we talk about increasing enrollment that we have to consider.
Thank you. And I know you are in the audience chomping at the bits to talk. So we're going to get through these next slides. If we could forward the next slide. So as we are planning what our considerations are, we really not only are thinking about the value-based planning, as you heard before, that we plan in connection or alignment with the district's mission, our new strategic planning goals, but the facilities also have to consider the taxpayer affordability. What can the community afford? We've heard and we all understand that property taxes, right, are high. I can't think of a nicer way to couch that statement. We want to make sure that whatever we are planning is something that we can sustain financially as well, and that the full community would support it. Matt, I don't know if you have anything else to say on that. We could forward to the next slide.
Sure.
So what do you think? What I'd like to do really briefly is go over from the planning what some of the strengths and challenges were brought to the table. And I would also like to really quickly review the scenarios that were pointed out in the 2021 master plan, and then we will turn the floor over to you. So we know that, we know that there were 3 options that were presented. We can go to the next slide. In terms of the options that were presented in the 2021 master plan, in red, you see we could do nothing. And all the challenges that were presented and all the things that Dr. Tu just talked about would just continue along with the projected increase in our enrollment. The 3 scenarios that were presented by the planners, scenario 1 is that we could redistrict and rebalance the enrollments across the 4 schools. We could build on where there is more growth and don't do any redistricting. And then finally, there's a sister school model, which was the recommendation by the planners. Sister school model is something that I have just recently learned about. So it is defined by having 2 schools that are paired together. However, one of the schools would house our pre-K through 2 students, and the other school would house our grade 3 through 5 students. So in the sister school model for our elementary schools, we would pair JP with CP and Riverside with Littlebrook. The attendance zones would be merged rather than redistricting or redrawn. And also we would be able to renovate all of the schools so that the schools would properly accommodate the new grade configurations. Next slide. So here in summary are the options that were presented in the 2021 master plan, both the pros and the cons. And we'll come back to that slide when you are discussing. So next slide. The feedback that we've received recently in terms of priorities that either the board has heard, administration, or in various community forums or discussions, we definitely have heard from the community that we want to keep the elementary programming that we currently have, including our DLI. We've heard feedback that the community is looking for parity of educational experiences across all 4 of our schools. We hear the community's value of smaller class sizes in the early years. So that's pre-K through grade 2. We have heard this preference of walking to school while recognizing the fairness of children at the elementary level that are bused to school. We've heard the priority of considering the impact of transitions on our elementary students. And we've heard from parents that are in the DLI program that ideally the program has room to grow. As Dr. Tu just stated, in the upcoming school year, we already have 3 sections of kindergartens that have enrolled in the DLI program. And the DLI full immersion is definitely valued by parents, but it is challenging given our district size, enrollment, and enrollment pressures with the current configuration of our schools. And we hear that the traditional or the non-DLI track at zone schools is important, but where there is a dual track, at least 2 sections per track per grade would be valuable. So next slide. Mr. Bolden, we would like to open up the floor to take community input. If you could please raise your hands if you would like to speak. We would love to hear your thoughts on the strengths and challenges, any questions that you might have. And Mr. Bolden, would you mind going back to the slide with the pros and cons of the chart so that, yep, that one right there. So we would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the options that are presented? Did we miss any pros? Did we miss any cons? And the TBD, are there any other scenarios that you have thought of? So I'm going to stop talking and turn the floor over to Mr. Bolden.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Looks like ST has a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, thanks, board and superintendent. Yeah, my name's Steve too. Moved over from West Windsor or Princeton Junction actually to Littlebrook this year. Just want to offer a few observations. Maybe there's kind of jumbled thoughts, but what strikes me is that there's much more of an emphasis on academic excellence and academics first there, including at the DLI program. And I think when they managed to that, they had like smaller class sizes, limits to heritage speakers, things like that. That would solve probably some of this load balancing. And I was wondering, like, if so, as we were moving here, we were told by many real estate brokers that, well, you could always move to Community Park and you can always opt out. So it was almost kind of like a loophole that people are being sold. So I'm just wondering if that kind of also contributed to a lot more movement into Community Park, where people would move there, but knowing that they could have an option and try to get to Littlebrook or Riverside or some other some of the other places. So I think that's something maybe to keep in mind. Also, just to share some experiences, and I think at Princeton Junction, you had two very successful DLI programs, and when you adjust it for student size, at the school, the one that we were in, Maurice Hawk, student-teacher ratio, or the classroom sizes, they were actually, it's not like they were much bigger schools. Once you adjust it for two DLI programs, it's actually on par here. So one of the things I heard a lot about in some of the prior commentary was like, oh, it's going to ruin the experience, if you mix, if it's not full immersion. I kind of based on what we saw at a very successful DLI program where they had two different languages that were really successful from the start, that didn't seem to be the case, just as a data point. And then as another aside, it's kind of, we're kind of surprised, moving here, our class size is actually larger over at Littlebrook than at Maurice Hawk, which is a large school, relatively large school. That, and then just wanted to mention one more thing. Yeah, going back to like the academics and stuff, I know there's, very, DEI is very important and all that, but I kind of think just given, just something to think about, if you actually really focus on academics first, and then worry about the other, let the other things fall in it, as chips fall, they will. If you focus on the core basics of academics, rigor and strength first, it solves a lot of the other problems. And that's why if you look at some of these test scores that are really kind of alarming coming out from, I think Dr. Kelly, you had sent that email with the state scores. I was really disappointed, just moving here to see those scores that are that low. And there, you're not talking about like the upper end gifted students. It's really measuring like kind of the struggle, the bare minimum expectations, the bottom end of the distribution. So it's kind of like I think if everybody if you focus more on the core academics, it solves some of this management issues maybe, and whether it's load balancing, more equitable loads across the schools because the program's going to be managed a little bit better, and then the academics. And just to harp on the academics a little bit more, the other thing that came out were those patch rankings for the schools, which are also just even more concerning now, seeing these come out. So I just really hope that academic rigor, academic excellence gets to be more the forefront, and that I think will solve a lot of all these other issues that are arising. Just one final thought.
And
and
if
I
you
know-
can make that your final, we just want to make sure we could hear from everyone.
Yep, will do. Dr. Tu mentioned AI. I think, this academic, focusing more on that in the future is probably going to be even more important because, with AI coming up and stuff like that, it's, our kids, we really have no idea what kind of a job market they're going to be able to go into, right? So that is going to be even more important in the future. So I really hope that the shift gets back to more, core academics. I think that'll hopefully solve a lot of the, other issues that the district seems to be facing. Thanks.
Thank you. And please, if we can get through everyone, you're more than welcome to raise your hand again. Thank you. The next speaker.
Alexis Johnson. Alexis?
She might be on mute. Are you on mute, Alexis? Do you need to unmute?
Here we go. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Yes, hi, this is Rob Walzer. I live over on Mount Lucas, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments just about these options here. And it's interesting because, status quo, doing nothing, always kind of, it's really just putting off a problem another year. Putting a scenario with a sister school. What's interesting is that I think one of the great things about our current schools, that setup that we have, is that our younger kids learn a lot from our older kids, and our older kids learn a lot of compassion by having like buddy programs with the younger kids. So, that really kind of breaks all that up. Really, having this dual language program isolated in just CP really doesn't have inclusivity. I mean, it's excluding people simply based on language, which is a strange thing for us to, be having in our community. There are a lot of models. Living in Brooklyn for years, there were a lot of models where there were dual language programs in the same building with non-dual language programs, and there were no issues. They worked very well together. I don't want my kid to be in the middle of a construction site for a few years while we have empty classrooms sitting open in other schools. And I find it interesting that, the Spanish teacher at her school, in fact, has to work out of a closet because we don't have a room for her. And so, it's interesting that we're now, having a discussion about, can we legally fit the kids into the classroom? And do we have can we fit them, rather than just having a discussion about, what's the best way for our kids to learn? So, so I just think we really need to make sure that we make the right options so that all of our students' needs are being met, rather than just making sure the wants of a few are being met. But yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Christine Blumauer.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Christine. I'm a CP parent, and I just wanted to share really great appreciation to the district and the board for providing an opportunity for real community engagement. And I really value also hearing from parents at the other elementary schools. And I'll say that I look forward to really absolutely finding the better solutions for all of us, and in a way that makes us grow stronger as a community, because I think for the most part, we share similar values and have similar aspirations for our kids in terms of providing inclusive learning environments, as well as achieving academic success. If I can ask one quick clarifying question, when you make reference to the report from the planners, are you making reference to the July 1st memorandum from 2021, July 1st, 2021, or is there something else?
Yeah, it's about 150 pages in total.
Okay, so that's just the summary. Yeah, I mean, I think especially since we're talking about cost, right? I understand that the sister school model has been the one that's been like sort of supported the strongest. And I'd be over time interested in just understanding how also how much the sister school model would cost. And I think hope that by the time recommendations come to the board in a little less than a year from now, the cost implications for each of the models, as well as, and when I say cost, I think also transportation and the cost to the environment around busing, etc., would be factored in. So that is more a comment than a question. Yeah, so I'll stop here and let others participate.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Margot Wilkinson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm at Little League right now. I am a current parent of a first grader at Johnson Park and have a incoming kindergartner in the fall. And, I think what I just wanted to call and say was I genuinely appreciate hearing everyone's sentiments lately. And I have so many wonderful friends who are really invested in the CP community. And I'm so empathetic to their situation. But I think when push comes to shove, I just really hope as we move forward, we're going to take into account the evolution of the education for all of our kids. And, I don't want anyone to feel that they've been sold short, but I genuinely hope that we will be able to take into account that this has a larger picture than just one school. And we want kids to, have seats at cafeteria tables and not be packed into classrooms that are too tight. And I hope that we can do this in a way that will resolve, the issues moving forward. And so that's really my only thought, is just respectfulness as we approach this difficult situation. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolden, as you're calling up the next person, I'm going to read one of the questions so we can do dual status here. And I might need a principal from CP or Dr. Tu to answer. Is the opt-out at CP by choice? And it says, for example, K through 2.
So the opt-out is kind of a misnomer. It's an inability to be in the school if one is not interested in dual language program, right? Because there's no other, what we have always called traditional class. So when we talk about opting out, if it's someone who doesn't want it, that is a true opt-out. If it's someone or a family who moves into the CP sending area at this time, after January of grade 1, we have not accepted kids who don't either come from another dual language program, who are not heritage or native speakers. And that is because we want the kids to be successful and set up for appropriate participation, and not placing them in a situation where they wouldn't be able to sort of jump right in. So I think hopefully that answers the question. So with the absence of the traditional class, there isn't any place for someone to go if they're looking for a traditional all English all day experience at Community Park School.
Thank you
for that.
Mm-hmm.
Alexia Burnett Salinas. Alexia?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. My name is Alexia Burnett Salinas, and I am a Johnson Park parent. Thank you for holding the session to get feedback from parents across all schools. When I look at the options here, I think they are good options, certainly to consider for the long term. But what is missing, and what I would love to see on number 4 there, is what are we doing for this fall? Quite frankly, I saw the state scores for Johnson Park. It is the lowest. That is not a reflection at all of Dr. Ciso Stentz and her amazing leadership, as well as the teachers there. I see that as a direct correlation to the overcrowding in the school. There is a lot of certainly emphasis on maintaining the dual language immersion. And as a Spanish speaker, I truly value having the second language and the importance of it. But we are managing to the minority. The majority of students in the elementary school are not the parents did not choose to enroll there. And so we are managing everybody to a class that is the smallest, quite frankly. You know, I heard certainly parents talk before about, well, we didn't want 2 schools in one. My child is in a classroom where we have 26 kids and the teacher is doing their very best. We have and are embracing essentially inequality in our education. And that's not something that I think any of us moved here for. We moved here for the school districts, majority of us did. And we're not seeing, I think, the education equality and that level that we expect when we came here. And I think if we do not do something, you know, certainly in an upcoming school year, we're being negligent in the responsibility to our kids. So the action I would say is challenge you to come up with a plan that we can deliver in this fall. And it could be a temporary solve. It could be getting, you know, additional units that are temporary and putting them in Johnson Park, Littlebrook. It could be trying to, you know, redistribute kids. We need to redistribute resources or people at some point. And I know that that is change and people don't like that. I know a lot of them have budget considerations, right? We are on a budget and I understand that. I am in business. So I think budget transparency as to where are we spending our money, where are we making those trade-offs so that we can actually do something this year and not in 3 to 4 years when honestly, most of the people in the board and the administration may be onto new roles. Our kids need, you know, attention now. And so I asked the board and Dr. Kelly, you and our principals to work together and see what can be done for this upcoming school year. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do apologize. My puppy is normally chill. I don't know what's going on tonight for the background noise where I am. Before you bring up the next person, Matt, this question might be for you. I'm not sure. These projections, in addition to assuming no parallel track in CP, also assume that the DLI program will have enrollment levels below where they currently are.
Yeah, that would be a fair assumption.
Okay.
That's correct. I would view that as correct. It's not accounting for more growth in the people that are, yes, that's a correct statement.
Okay.
Adeline Cole.
Hi, actually, this is Christy Cole. I am a Littlebrook parent for 7 years now. I'm in my 7th year. And I've watched the changes of the class sizes getting larger. And I am disappointed that the district's plan currently is to do that status quo, do nothing for next year. I think our kids are going to pay the price at Littlebrook, and people should know that our class sizes will not go down from where they are. There's a big difference when I've had years in the past with 16, 17 kids, and I've had years with 24, 25 kids, and that's a lot for a teacher. Children can't contribute to the class as much when you've got 9 extra students in the class. We also at Littlebrook, there's no flex space. I know in your presentation, you cited that as, you know, as a goal. There's no flexible space in the school. If you want to meet with somebody, teachers are meeting in the lobby. It's packed. I think it's hard to know that there's empty classrooms in town that aren't being utilized. And I wish you would consider adding a traditional option at CP even next year, just to take the burden off of the students at the more crowded schools. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you want to take the next speaker, Matt, or the next question? One question, it says, do the CP projections account for growth of, I think you answered that one already.
Yes.
Okay.
No, they do not account for growth in the people that want DLI.
Dr. Chu, this might be for you. Can we see updated numbers for kindergarten registration this fall? Prior to COVID, growth at CP was consistent, and the 2021 projections for elementary schools look quite different. Perhaps enrollment will rebound now that remote learning is behind us. So
So I don't have the most up-to-date, I have them from about a week or two ago. Right now, Riverside is our smallest. It's projecting only one kindergarten class for next year. That's as of now, in April 27th at 7:19 p.m. With the data that I have in front of me. CP has the most, in looking at 3 sections of DLI. Then Johnson Park has about 41. And then Little Brook has about 31, so 2 sections. Johnson Parks is creeping up there. So thinking about 3 sections for kindergarten next year. I got a really great question via email from a parent a couple of weeks ago, sort of saying, well, how do we determine when we add a class section or move a class section and all those type of things? That's hard to say. It's a little bit like fortune telling because we can't predict when people are going to enroll. We do our best to advertise for kinder enrollment, for new move-ins. With the construction coming online in Thanet in May, we've reached out to their office management and said, here's our registration forms, here's how to contact us, because we want to know really strong estimates of what to expect come September. But a lot of times people register late. I tell this story all the time where in my own home district, they had 20 registrations the last week of August. They added a kindergarten section 2 days before school started because they didn't want such a high number of kindergarten students in a classroom. So we really do try to track it. Principals work with my central office registration team and really then align staff to where we need it to go to help balance out those numbers. So I hope that helped provide some context.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Melissa?
Yes, I just want to say Community Park was the heart of the Latino community in the early 90s. And I believe with the lack of just trust within parent-teacher partnerships and having a good parent liaison, a lot of the parents are going towards Johnson Park and they feel that they're being represented. And I feel a lot of the teachers need to be in all of the different schools. And that's how you're going to have growth. And not only that, the inclusion begins with the preschool. There's a lack of before and after care at some of the schools. The Board of Education has done lotteries and has stated that organizations were going to provide services. And this is to the underprivileged in your community. And they're busing other children to other, preschools. And we don't have room. We shouldn't be renting from, churches and in certain sections in public housing and part of nonprofit organizations to build the community up. We don't have a lot of inclusion. A lot of the Hispanic community actually isn't putting their children into the dual language program. And really, it's a last resource to put their children into Community Park. It's unfortunate. I think we haven't reached out to a lot of the organizations that are needed, that are a huge demographic to this community. And it's a disservice to everyone who is paying taxes. We're mismanaging money.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll take one other question. I'm not sure if there's anyone on the panel able to answer. Maybe Dr. Tu. Are the preschool programs in all schools evenly? Is it a possibility to add the new programs into the schools that have capacity?
That's a great question. So currently we're adding a pre-K DLI program to CP for next year. And then we have 2 preschool disability classes. We're adding a 3rd one coming online, I believe. Eric is on the phone call. He can confirm that. And then we have 2 one in Riverside and 1 in JP, 2 other preschool sections. So yes, that is a consideration. As I shared earlier, it's about certain code and bathrooms, etc. So it sounds easy, but then we have to sort of be compliant with certain things like that. So definitely that is a consideration if we have enough classrooms with bathrooms and the required square footage that is needed by the New Jersey DOE to do that. And that's why we added that program for pre-K DLI at CP, and with the new preschool disabilities class coming online that is required to meet students' needs, it will likely go to community park as well if there's space.
Thanks, Dr. Tu. Laura?
Hi, this is Laura Coley. I'm a parent at Community Park, and thank you for hosting this event for us. So the first thing I'd like to say is, in terms of the status quo of doing nothing, I hope that something you'll consider for the immediate future is assigning the new Thanet Circle development to Community Park as their attendance area school. And the reason for that is, you know, as you've stated, about 50% of people that are within Community Park zone opt into the school, but then outside of the Community Park zone, it's, you know, got to be less than 5%. So simply by telling people that they're zoned for CP, you drastically increase the chances that they'll send their child there. And those of us that happen to just move into a house that are zoned for CP are completely thrilled with the program, and the DLI program has opened many doors for our children that perhaps we wouldn't have thought of if the district hadn't said you're zoned for CP. So I hope that you'll consider zoning those schools for Community Park and then sending those who want to opt out to Riverside instead of having Riverside be the first line choice for the new developments coming on board. And the next thing I want to say is it feels like the information about the sister schools has been sort of incomplete. I think the main thing that's missing is that adding an English only track to CP seems like it could only happen with the sister school model, simply because CP is not large enough to support a full section of DLI children and a full section of English only children. So in order to have 2 equal sections and not just, you know, create large class sizes of DLI, the school as it currently is can't support that. The last point I want to make is just about the sister school model. The pairings that you're proposing with JP and CP, and then Littlebrook with Riverside, to me feel imbalanced because there's some real racial and socioeconomic imbalances happening between those 2 pairings. And this would further perpetuate some of the differences that we already see in test scores and some of the biases that are really prevalent throughout Princeton about which schools are the best schools. And we're already hearing about some of this on this very call about what the real estate agents are telling families about what, you know, things like niche or the other ratings say about our schools based on their test scores. And we know that those are heavily tied to racial and socioeconomic factors. And I just hope that a future model won't perpetuate those things that already exist. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Laura. I just want to touch real quickly, Dr. Kelly, if you will, the points that she made about the dual track at CP would be, and the other option would be to add on to CP to support 4 classrooms at each grade. So
right,
not just a sister school, but I just want to make that point real quick.
Thank you.
Violetta Medina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hello. I'm Violetta Medina. I am a mother from CP, from the Dual Language Immersion program. And I would just like to clarify some misconceptions I have heard in this presentation, mainly for other parents of other schools that I think they are getting a sense of unfairness about the situation of their kids versus kids in other places. The classes sizes in DLI are not that much smaller than in Littlebrook or Johnson Park. The fact that there are classrooms available doesn't mean that our children have smaller class sizes. I'm not the director. I don't know all the numbers. I know my kid is in a class with 22. The suggestion that other parents were kind of well-meaning, thinking, okay, let's add a traditional track into CP to balance that. That will actually not happen. The proposal that was rejected for next year, it was adding class sizes of 11, 16 of traditional. So basically, it will not achieve fairness because that would be that very small classes as well. And I would like also to point out that in the last meeting, it was agreed that the term of opting out of CP was misleading, and it was agreed that they were not going to be used in the future because it paints a picture that is not the reality. 70% of the parents that opt out under, I say that with air quotes, are not because they not wish to join the program. It's just because they cannot, because they have older kids that they cannot join at higher grades, or because the kids they have, they cannot join because they are past the first grade. So when you say opt out, it creates a feeling that the program is not successful and is not attracting people, when it's just simply the way it is organized that cannot bring those people. Another point to point out is CP has a larger proportion of rental than other areas of Princeton. That means we have much more a transient community, that sometimes they go to CP and then they leave, and that leaves a gap in our school, where in the higher grades they are kind of they cannot be filled because you have to find like a child in 4th grade that knows enough Spanish to join the program. So that creates shape of the school that will always be bottom heavy because there is an erosion as the class part. And that brings me to the next point is Dr. Q, in the last time that she provided like hard data of kindergarten enrollment, said that around 30 kids were in the other school, where 60 kids were already enrolled for kindergarten. And that is to bring the point of Matthew Baldwin, that graph that you show, I think is completely misleading, because if in the future, if already for 2023, we have double the amount of kindergartens, in the next year for the 1st grade, we're going to have double the amount. So that will fill out naturally the school without having to do anything drastic. And another point
we want to make sure everyone can speak. You make a very
just my last point. I would like to say that the pandemic had like a larger effect on CP than in other schools, because people left the public system and they could rejoin in their zone schools, but they couldn't rejoin in CP because the kids had already kind of missed that Spanish instruction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Violeta. Samuel Bunting.
On reading. Hi, sorry, it's actually Nina Peel here. And I excuse me, I have 2 kids in the CP school in the DLI program. I just wanted to make 2 points. The first point was that there was recently an external review of the DLI program, and 2 messages came to the surface, both of which I think speak to the enrollment stuff. The first was a strong suggestion that a strategic plan was needed. And I think that this probably needs to be put in place quick, sharp, so that we can use it to guide decisions related to enrollment as well as other things. And the second thing that came out of that external review that speaks to the enrollment stuff is that there was suggestions, and there were suggestions in the external review that the program was not reaching the heritage speakers that it had been partially designed to reach out to. And there were some, and I think that there's no argument about that, there were some suggestions given in that external review about how to reach out to heritage Spanish speakers to help get them involved in the DLI program. And I think that those options, as far as I'm aware, have not been explored. And I definitely think there's something that should be thought about when we're thinking about enrollment and CP and the DLI program. And then the second point that I wanted to make is a completely random thing. I am looking at these models, and I look at the sister school model, and I'm freaking out because I'm not sure how one is supposed to pick up 2 kids who are too young to be home alone in 2 different places at the same time. So if you have a 3rd grader who's too young to be home alone and a kindergartner, then you have to be in 2 places, picking one up or being at home for the bus to arrive for the other. And that seems impractical. And besides that, it's not environmentally sustainable because a lot of people at CP already walk or bike to school, and that's, taking cars and buses off the roads. And if those people had to be bused to Johnson Park, or half of them, then it would be sad for the community and sad for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
That's definitely good points. And then Matt, I don't know if you can answer this question from the chat. It's about the projected cost of external professional advice on design cost and budget implications. What's the timing on projected costs being available, or will the projected costs be available once a scenario is selected?
I think we'll have to work out estimates concurrently with the decision plan, right? Because that's going to be an important input into the equation, right? If we don't have a good idea of the costs, which we kind of did, we worked through that. There's been some inflation in 2 years since the study, but we have rough costs. But it will be concurrent with with the decision process.
All right. And in terms of our discussions, which there is a next step slide, do you have any projections as to when that might be made available to the community, or not quite yet?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else with their hands up? I can keep going with questions from the chat. Okay.
Joe, you want to alternate? That's fine.
Yeah, let's alternate. Your turn.
Sebastian Philippe.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I've had the chance to review all the public documents with regard to projections and enrollment in our district. And I was very confused about the long-term 10 years projection that were presented, especially last February, where the long-term enrollment at Community Park, for example, naturally capped or goes down to 236 students, which is exactly essentially 2 DLI sections per class year. I'm confused why in all the options that you presented today, simply proposing the option to have 3 DLI sections at CP would not solve a lot of our enrollment issue in the district, because naturally the total number of students would at least increase to 354 and alleviate a lot of the pressure, especially at JP. So I'm very confused about the core assumptions that were made in preparing those projections, and in your preparation towards potential solution in the short to medium term, whether you will revise all those assumptions, because it seems to be essentially pretty misleading at this point. Thank you.
Now, we will constantly be it's everything is a snapshot in time. So, not that we can do that every year, but every other year or every, we will be obviously revising things as we move forward. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Sebastian. Go ahead, Dr. Kelly.
let's see. This is a really interesting question. Someone would like to know about how grandfathering kids, e.g. who are not in their zone school, such as who was unable to attend. Did you notice that I didn't use opt-out? Who were unable to attend a community park, although for some it is yes. Okay. So for example, if a student who lives in the community park zone area was unable to attend because they were older when they registered and they attend another school, the question is, would they be grandfathered into whatever school they currently are in? So I would assume the answer would be yes, but it also could be, it depends, right?
Depends what, what grade and the timing, but that does make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's something good for us to consider. So thank you for that question. Is there anyone else with their hand raised?
Yeah, we have 8 people currently. Preeti?
Okay.
Hey guys, thank you so much for giving the opportunity to hear the feedback from the community, because community is the one where the real deal is happening, right? It's not just few people sitting in the office and thinking what we should do. So I was thinking if the new 2023 pre-K or pre-kindergartners or kindergartners who are joining CP, we continue with that. Let everybody who is joining new go to CP if they're in the CP zone, and have the traditional classes also there. However, with the current kids who are in JP or Littlebrook, leave them there till they graduate from elementary. And that way we resolve the issue of parents dealing with their current the model shifting from one school to another, and they don't go through the stress. Let them go through the graduation, have the new kids starting the kindergarten going from 2023 itself, rather than waiting for next year or a few more years, and have those traditional classes going in CP. So we utilize the space there and get the right teachers recruited if needed, whatever needs to be done to support the current kids who are in JP or Littlebrook or Riverside, and have a temporary unit being built just for those 4 or 5 years for them to finish their schooling. That way we take care of the zoning. So whoever comes into CP zone has a choice. They have the traditional classes in CP, and they also have the DLI in CP, so they can pick whatever they're comfortable with, and do not force anybody whose kids are already in JP or Littlebrook or Riverside to go through this transition. That I think would bring some balance to the issue which we are facing, and not push our problem in future, but immediately act on it.
Okay, thank you. So that sounds similar to the scenario number 2, but maybe it's another option. So thank you for sharing that. Yes, the program did begin at 6:30, so sorry about that. One question, how does Sister School Model work with DLI? Dr. Tu, would you mind answering that?
Yeah, so basically what it would do, it would just alleviate some pressure of enrollment across the building. So there would be, let's just say 5 or 6 sections in a grade level, so that, 2 of them would be DLI, or 3, depending on enrollment. And you would just have more growth and space to kind of flesh out, versus having like 2 DLI sections and 1 traditional, because CP right now cannot maintain 4 general education classrooms per grade level. There's just not enough classroom space, or even some of the larger spaces that we talked about earlier tonight. So the DLI would look like it would be, if say JP was pre-K through 2, it'd be in K and 2 there. There'd be a couple of sections of DLI per grade level, and then 3-5 at CP, if that was the model that the district decided to move forward with.
So the more sections at each grade creates less variation in class size?
Yes, of course. Thank you, my mathematician over here. Yes, that's exactly
Just
right.
restate, you said it so well, but I just,
Yes.
awesome. Do you want to go? I'll go ahead. Zoe Freund?
Yes.
Hi, this is Danny Freund. Thanks so much for holding this session.
Danny.
Hi. A few questions and thoughts. First is, I'm concerned about the decisions that are going to be made in the summer when many parents may not be engaged in the summer. So I was wondering if you're considering having another session like this or open forums during the summer when the decisions are going to be made or prior to the decisions being made. So that's one question I have.
Okay.
The second thing is I'm concerned. So my kids are both at Community Park. I have
Okay.
a 3rd grader and a 5th grader, and I'm concerned not only now, but what I've been hearing for many years when situations like this end up pinning some schools against other schools for a perception of inequity. And so what I'd like the district to consider, the board and our schools to consider, that each of our different schools have strengths and our community has valued different things in different schools. For example, in Riverside, as we all know, there's the program that supports children on the spectrum, and the needs at Riverside are different than the needs at some of the other schools, for example. And so, you know, the community has valued the dual language program, and we now have kids from pre-kindergarten all the way up going into 9th grade next year that have been in the dual language program. And so one solution that I see that might work for next year is, I think it's very important that the younger grades maintain dual language only. So for example, if in kindergarten and 1st grade would be Spanish only, and then potentially 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, or maybe 3rd, 4th, and 5th, if you allowed a traditional class in those grades, that would allow families that are moving into the area, that anyone who has a younger child to go into CP would be in the dual language program, and in an older grade, we would still be able to accommodate those families. I think that might be a solution that could work. Community Park has almost always had traditional classes. And so while I recognize that next year may be the first year where the entire school is going to be, you know, a dual language immersion school, you know, I'm also a realist knowing that we need to balance things out. And so I think that that might be a solution that could work. And then the last question that I have is, can you share some transparency around the families that have chosen a different school? So my questions are, who tracks that information? Is that happening at the school level or at the district level? Because I think it's really misleading saying that, you know, 50% of the families are going to other schools. We don't really know why that is. And so, you know, I think, so that's a question for whoever could answer it.
There's not a really good answer. Go ahead, Dr. Tu.
So central registration keeps track in Power School of families who decide to attend outside their zone, whether it's for special education placement, they're deciding not to join the DLI program, whatever it may be. And then we keep track of those records. So, you know, there was a question in the chat earlier, we haven't gotten to it yet, about, you know, why would families not, you know, choose not to enter into DLI? There's a variety of reasons. A lot of times what we hear is they have one older child and one younger child, and they want to keep their children together. And so they decide to choose another neighborhood school to do that. It's not about the program's quality or anything like that. It's just not a fit at that time.
And thank you so much. I just want to add one last piece that I think might be a mystery in the community. So, you know, when the dual language first started, we had many Latino and native Spanish speakers that had come to Community Park. And the reason why that happened was because we had liaisons who intentionally called families to explain the program and recruit them. And I will say in the last many years, there have been some liaisons who have been steering people outside of Community Park. And so I would just like to be transparent about that, that I think it would be very helpful to have some native Spanish speaking families who understand the program, to do some outreach to native Spanish speaking families to explain what the program is and what the benefits could be, because that seems like it's missing. And it's not, well, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think that that would be a great next step, and I'd be happy to support that. And I'm sure that there would be a number of families that would be willing to rally around that to support that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Matt, do you mind going to the slide, the next steps? Because I think that was one of his questions regarding the summer. All right, so everyone, I promise I won't take too long. Just wanted to let you know that we will have the Google survey, and Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind putting it back in the chat, we will have that Google survey. We will push it out to the entire elementary community. If you could please complete it by May 19th. We hope to, excuse me, we hope to work with our building principals and their PTO leaders to come out to PTO meetings where there might be an opportunity to take input for those who attend. We are also planning to have a district-wide in-person meeting June 5th at 6:30 p.m. at the high school cafeteria. And on May 18th, the long-term planning committee of the board is meeting at 4:30 p.m. And we will advertise the Zoom link so that you can come and virtually come and listen to that conversation. And other opportunities for sure are to come.
Thank you.
Sure. Do you want to take the next speaker?
Sure. Josh Rabinowitz. Josh.
Hi.
Hi.
I appreciate the district leadership taking the time to listen to the parents, and I appreciate all the parents who are so openly sharing our thoughts. And I want to echo what Danny said about how we all, need to work together to do what we can to support the district. As a CP parent now for a long time, I just want to say that I've had 3 kids go through, and only now with the small erosion that does happen as some kids leave the district and it's hard to enter the dual language program as a 4th or 5th grader. I finally have a student, my 5th grader, who has less than 20 kids in the class. I understand the current kindergarten and 1st grade are very small, and that represents some, the difficulties with planning after COVID, but generally it's been a popular program. And I know there were years that more students wanted to enroll than could. And I do think a lot of what we're seeing now are COVID related issues with DLI enrollment. It's, as we heard, a hard program to join if you don't get in right away. And it also is a scary program to join when kids had been missing school due to COVID, and there was so much disruption. To add this added variable of a second language, as wonderful as it is now that the world is coming back to normal. And so I don't really know how we ended up with 4 classes of kindergarten and 1st grade being all dual language at CP. That, I guess in hindsight at least, was overambitious. But CP is a school that's designed to have and be absolutely chock full with 3 20-person classes per grade. And what I'm hearing is that there's demand for 3 20-person classes to enter CP as kindergartners, which to me says there's a simple, stable model here. And, I understand there may be some challenges that have to be met to deal with these, sequelae of the COVID-related disruptions. But basically, I feel like it's in a good place. It's doing a great job for the kids in the program. There's demand for it at the 3 classes per grade level, which completely fills CP school. And I'm very, very confused and a little bit distraught with projections that show, low 200 numbers of students when this is the incoming demand of kindergartners, and this is the size the school has been throughout almost all of the time that our kids have been there.
Understood.
Thank you.
Josh.
Really quickly, question. I'm just going to read it aloud. I'm unable to answer it, but there may be someone on the panelists that might, including any of the board members. Is it true that sister school program schools are not ranked on websites like Great Schools, et cetera? And therefore, if Princeton elementary schools aren't ranked anymore or disqualified, this may lower overall property values around town. I don't know the answer to that.
I think both would be with, I'm not an expert in this, so I won't say it.
Okay.
Once again, I'm not an expert, but each school is individually listed on Great Schools. So there would still be individual school reporting. The only thing that would be different is that the district is putting them in tandem with each other, that we're sending from one building to the other. So if you look at West Windsor has sister schools. If you typed in Maurice Hawk versus Millstone River, they should both show up, that they're not tied to one.
Okay.
But that, once again, just wanted to clarify, not an expert, but I believe it's individual schools, but I see Daphna has her hand raised.
So, thanks, Dr. Tu. Dr. Kelly, I just wanted to say what's next. I know there are plans to survey the teachers as well.
Yes.
And are they, so they can complete the Google Doc, is that right?
No, they have another Google Doc that will be sent out to them. I believe we also are doing a staff meeting. I forget the date, where we're bringing, no, the schools are going to do like the individual meeting, and jump in there, guys. There were plans that we made for staff. I just don't remember them off the top of my head.
Ms. Crowder is here as she's one of our PREA co-presidents. So Elizabeth, our public information officer, has created a package of the slide deck. We'll have the recording and a Google form just for staff that PREA has kindly said that they will share out to staff to complete.
Okay, I just wanted the community to know that that's also, they're very important stakeholders that we want to hear from about all this. So that will their survey all wrap up by June 5th, or what's the timing on that?
Yeah, I don't think we would keep it open much. I mean, that would be over a month from now. So I think that would give, 3 to 4 weeks should be plenty of time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Do you want to keep going with do you have another question in the chat, or you want to?
No, please, let's, we only have about 4 minutes left. So let's try to just do the questions where hands are raised.
Erica Snyder.
Hi, I am a parent from CP. I have 2 students in the DLI program and one who will be a rising kinder. And thank you, Daphna, for asking that question, because that was my first question about the teacher's input on these options. My second question actually is thinking a little bit larger is what I'm seeing in the projections. I'm wondering if we're being too short-sighted about couching this as an elementary school problem, and not thinking about like how that impacts, if this growth trend holds, the middle school and high school spaces as well. And I'm wondering if there are different potential models or options that have been looked at, such as more of like a junior high base where a 5-6 is one building and a 7-8 is another building, as opposed to the sister schools, which disrupts the younger population. But thinking about different structures like that, so that if what I'm seeing in the other options, I'm sorry, if you could go back to the other slide with the options on it, those assume some sort of construction or some sort of renovation in the options that I think y'all are leaning towards. I'm wondering then if it doesn't make more sense to think differently about how we're grouping the PK2, 3, 5, and think about grouping possibly some middle age students a little bit differently, which developmentally tends to actually help those students and those grade levels as well to be a little bit more broken up. So just thinking differently about the way that we're approaching the chunking of students. It does sound pretty heavily like the sister school model is where y'all are favoring to go right now, but maybe it's different thinking about the chunking of students as opposed to the elementary level where the transitions and changes are a little bit more challenging.
Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Kathleen Brennan.
And this unfortunately, it may be the last. So if you have your hand raised, would you mind putting your question in the chat so that we would be able to see that?
Dr. Kelly, would we be able just to extend it for 10 or 15 more minutes, just so everyone who has their hands up, if we could limit the speaking to 2 minutes, and we could go through, I believe Andrew Skay was the last one that had his hand up.
Sure. And anyone that's on the panel from the district, if you need to hop off, I understand.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kelly.
Mhm.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for hosting this evening and allowing all the parents from the 4 elementary school to get to express our respective realities so we understand more what's going on outside the walls of our respective school. I'm not speaking here as the co-president of the PTO of Johnson Park, but as a mother of a first grader who has been at Johnson Park for 4 years now under a lot of IEP program. And I will, because of time constraint, I will limit my comment to the following. I would like to propose a few suggestions, not for the long term, but for next year. I'm very sensitive that we don't want to move children outside JP to go back to any other school, even if we have right now 430 something students, and we are at capacity in most of our classroom. Johnson Park, for parents may not know from other school, is that we have restriction on how we can increase the size of our school, so we cannot expand the area that our school occupy on the ground of the Johnson Park Preserve. I was wondering if it's possible for next year to have a temporary facility attached to the school or not too far from the school where we could have our special teachers like music and art being temporarily housed there, freeing their classroom so we could perhaps separate those grades that are really at capacity so that we would have less student in the classroom while maintaining our current population. I don't know if that is feasible with the constraint we have, but I think that it's something that would worth to be looked at. The other comment that I have is that equity is front and center in the forward focus plan that Dr. Kelly has presented in February, and equity to me should be in all the schools. I will narrow my comment on equity with respect to our special education teachers. Johnson Park has about 108 students with IEP who requires the service of these wonderful teachers, but we only have 9 teachers for 108 students. And we have about 55 more or less students with English second language for only 1 teacher. I don't believe it is the experience of our student in the other school. I think they have a better ratio student teacher. And I'm wondering if it's possible to have satellite special education teacher so that the speech therapist or the occupational therapist or physical therapist or ESL teacher in the other school could, instead of being assigned to a designated school, would deserve the entire 4 elementary school so that we would have perhaps a better service to our IEP student. And lastly, I would just like to, yes?
Just speed it up. We want to get some more questions in, please.
Yeah, I would like if you can provide in a future communication, you mentioned in one of your slides that less than half of the population of JP comes from the territory of JP. Would it be possible for you to share what is that ratio for the other 3 elementary school? Thank you.
Thank you.
Your comment to 2 minutes, so we can get through everyone, so our staff can go home and get ready for the day. Thank you.
Lindsay Weiss. Lindsay?
She's on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Hi. So so many thoughts running through my mind, but the biggest concern that I have is that people move to Princeton to be a community, and we choose to pay higher taxes over moving to surrounding towns so that we don't have to have the sister school model, so that our kids can be together in the elementary school model the way that it was designed, K through 5, or now pre-K through 5. And it seems to me all the plans that you're presenting are looking not only, I mean, the first plan would be to rip kids from their community school and put them somewhere else. And now you're looking to divide families and siblings at different ages. And it just doesn't seem to be the answer. So to the extent that you have already put plans on hold for this school year, I think slow and steady wins the race. And, I think there just needs to be so many more discussions over the best way to move forward. We're all feeling the squeeze of, the numbers, and we understand that our kids' classrooms are huge, but we also understand that after the pandemic, our kids need their community, whether it's a class of 15 kids or a class of 26 kids, and they need to be in their home schools, and they need to be, where they are now. And just like the DLI program was an eventual, phase out from Community Park to make it entirely DLI, I think a phase out or redistricting plan from other schools and moving kids needs to be an eventual process over time. And we really just need to consider the kids first in all of this, and find a way really to make it so our community is not divided, so that we can come together and, have camaraderie for each other, and feel happy about living and proud to live in Princeton.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Portia Wong.
Hi there. I didn't prepare any kind of formal remarks for this evening, but just wanted to echo some of the other comments that have happened this evening. Looking at these 3 plans, I'd just like to say that I'm really not in favor of sister schools. I think that it's too much transition between schools, especially for kids that are that young. We had a problem earlier this year with the bus system as it is, living half a mile from the school that my kids go to, and they were still on the bus for an hour coming home. So having splitting kids up between, Riverside and Little, eventually the middle school, it's difficult, if not impossible, to be able to pick everyone up on time. And as someone else said earlier, these kids are too young to be left home alone. So that's problematic. Also, my kids are really excited to stay at their current school. When I mentioned to my son that we were talking about possibly a sister school model, his direct quote was, "I loathe that idea." So he's not a fan. But then additionally, I'd like to say that I appreciate the DLI program at Community Park. And I would like for it to be able to stay there. It cannot stay the way that it currently is. Someone else made the comment tonight that it's really catering to the needs of the few at the expense of the many. And unfortunately, I do agree with that. People move to Princeton for the educational system, for these community schools, and to have people being bused all over the place because they're opting out or unable. Yeah, I say unable to attend Community Park. And then other classrooms are getting crowded. It's just the status quo as it currently stands is detrimental for the students' education. It puts undue burden on the teachers and staff to be trying to teach so many kids. It's simply not working. I essentially, if you were to say, "Hey, Portia, what do you want it to look like for next year?" Really, I do like the plan that Dr. Tu had originally presented, if it could be rolled out more gradually. The kind of returning children to the schools that they're actually, that they are closest to geographically is really nice. It keeps, Littlebrook neighborhood with Littlebrook school, Community Park neighborhood with Community Park school, and so on. But it's not yanking, a 3rd grader out of Johnson Park and everyone they know, and then sticking them someplace brand new. Like someone had mentioned the idea of kind of phasing it out more slowly so that these children have the opportunity to graduate 5th grade with their peers. And, I think that some kind of compromise like that would be the best solution. And a
Thank you.
non-DLI track at CP for this fall. I would strongly urge you to consider that.
Thank you, Portia. Corinne, Ryan?
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Corinne Ryan. I have 4 kids that are currently attending Littlebrook. 2 of them sit in classes that are almost at the caps. 1 is in a class that is at the cap, and I have 1 that is in a class that is actually over the cap. I had submitted a comment earlier, so I'm just going to read that. But West Windsor has a successful DLI program with class caps, a strict enrollment admission process, and the ability to test into higher grades only if there is an opening in the class. They also seem to have a more well-defined purpose and goal. By doing this, they have been able to fully integrate 2 DLI programs into the 2 elementary schools. I'm just wondering if we have considered any type of class caps to our DLI program, which would then better utilize our school space rather than just admitting everybody who applies for the program and ending up with empty classrooms in one school while we have other schools like Littlebrook with teachers on carts. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Andrew Sky?
And this is the last speaker, right, Mr. Bolden?
I mean, there's 3 other people with their hands raised, but whatever I mean, it's 8:10.
Well, we said we were going to go to Mr. Sky.
Andrew?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Andrew Ski. I have a son at Johnson Park. I just want to speak up for this notion of grandfathering kids that are already at a certain school. If relative to the redistricting plan, because we talk so much about communities at these schools. These kids spend years there, they build their community, that's where all their friends are. The idea of yanking, a few kids, 57 kids, and telling them they're no longer allowed to be a part of the community that we've been building, to say nothing of the optics, just seems, it seems extreme. And I think that it's a very separate issue from the idea of redistricting for kids who do not yet attend the schools. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.
All right. For those who, Mr. McDonald. I think you might be on mute.
Go ahead, Dr. Kelly. I just wanted to make 2 short comments on behalf of the board. Should I do that now or?
Yes, you can close us out, actually. If anyone still had a question, please do put it in the chat. And Elizabeth, if you could please, one more time, I'm sorry, just include in the chat the Google form. And we will be sure to also send that out to the community. So Mr. McDonald, you have the final word.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the members of the administrative team and to our principals who took their evenings to be with us. I wanted to thank the members of the community for what I thought was a very thoughtful and civil discussion that will be continuing for many weeks and a few months. And I wanted to assure everybody that no decisions have been made. I see fellow board members nodding, but this is very true. We are listening. We want to hear from as many members of the community as possible, from as many parents as possible. And I think tonight was what I would call a great start to that process. And we all look forward to this continuing. And I think we all agree that whatever decision is made, we all want that to be what's in the best interest of all of our children. And that's always going to be on the forefront of our minds. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.